Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As we may all know, Indonesia has 6 different religions and beliefs, and therefore I would like to warmly welcome all of you in 6 different greetings. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Welcome to the seminar High Level Policy Dialogue Indonesia's ASEAN Chairmanship 2023, promoting ASEAN relevance in global market. Can we please give big round of applause for all of us? It is truly an honor for me to be your host for this morning. But before we continue our session, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the Honorable Head of Trade Policy Agency of the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Kasan. Thank you very much for coming. President of ERIA, Mr. Tetsuya Watanabe. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. Executive Chairman B Universe, and also former Minister of Trade, Mr. Enggar Tiasto Lukito. Professor of International Economics, Princeton University, Mr. Jean Grossman. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. And also lead advisor for Southeast Asia region from ERIA, Ms. Lily Yaning. And also I would like to welcome our chairs, the economists from ERIA, Ms. Doanti Tanha. Welcome. Research economist from ADBI, Mr. Daniel Surya Dharma. Thank you very much for coming, sir. Senior economist from ERIA, Ms. Fauzia Zen. Senior energy economist from ERIA, Ms. Han Pumin. Thank you very much for coming. Our speakers, expert staffs, senior advisors and leaders from the Ministry of Trade, ERIA, ITAPS from IPB University, ADBI and SMERU Research Institute. Thank you very much for coming and joining us in this session. And last but not least, all offline and online participants. Ladies and gentlemen, the high-level policy dialogue today is a collaborative activity between the Trade Policy Agency of the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia with ERIA, ITAPS IPB University, ADBI and SMERU Research Institute, which aims to discuss the priorities of ASEAN under the Indonesia's chairmanship in 2023. With a form of dialogue amongst academics, practitioners, think tank, institution, and government officials, it is expected to generate a set of policy recommendations to the government of the Republic of Indonesia in shaping better economic deliverables in the Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship in 2023 that will support post-pandemic recovery and promote strong regionalism in ASEAN. This event will take place in English. For the morning session will be conducted hybrid using Zoom conference and live streaming through Badan, Kebijakan, Perdagangan YouTube channel. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the first agenda is singing the national anthem of Indonesia Raya. Kindly all the respective guests please to stand up for singing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya.
Indonesia
Thank you. You may return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we will listen together to the remarks from the Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia that will be represented by Head of Trade Policy Agency, the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Please welcome on the stage Dr. Kasan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Very good morning to you. Pertama, saya ingin menyampaikan permohonan maaf dari Bapak Menteri Perdagangan yang pada awalnya beliau akan hadir secara langsung. Namun karena ada hal yang tugas mendadak sehingga kemarin menugaskan saya untuk membacakan remarks beliau pada kegiatan hari ini. Jadi saya bertugas membacakan pidato atau remarks dari Bapak Menteri Perdagangan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang saya hormati Presiden ERIA Profesor Tetsuya Watanabe, yang saya hormati Menteri Perdagangan Republik Indonesia 2016-2019 sekaligus Eksekutif Chairman di Universe Bapak Enggar Tiasto Lukita, yang saya hormati Deputi Sekretaris Jenderal untuk ASEAN Economic Community Mr. Satvinder Singh, yang saya hormati Profesor Grossman dari Princeton University, para pembicara dan moderator yang berasal dari Indonesia dan mancanegara, para pejabat pimpinan tinggi media dari berbagai kementerian dan lembaga, serta seluruh undangan yang berbahagia. Puji syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala atas rahmat dan hidayahnya karena kita masih diberikan kesehatan dan kesempatan untuk hadir pada acara pagi hari ini. Apresiasi juga kepada Badan Kebijakan Perdagangan, Kementerian Perdagangan, yang juga beserta seluruh mitra kerja, pertama ERIA, yang kedua ITAPS IPB, ADB Institute, dan SMERU Research Institute yang telah berkolaborasi dalam penyelenggaraan High Level Policy Dialog sebagai salah satu forum dialog untuk mendukung agenda prioritas dalam Keketuaan Indonesia di ASEAN tahun 2023. Hadirin yang saya hormati, ASEAN sebagai organisasi kawasan memiliki peran ekonomi yang strategis bagi dunia. Pada tahun lalu atau tahun 2022, pertumbuhan ekonomi ASEAN mencapai 5,6%. Nilai PDB ASEAN juga mencapai 3,62 triliun. Kontribusi ekspor ASEAN ke dunia mencapai 8,4% dari total ekspor dunia di tahun lalu sebesar 2,05 triliun. Dengan perannya yang strategis, arti keketuaan Indonesia di ASEAN tahun 2023 tentu menjadi sangat penting. Keketuaan Indonesia berlangsung sejak 1 Januari hingga 31 Desember 2023 dengan mengangkat tema ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. Tema tersebut memiliki dua elemen besar. Elemen pertama adalah ASEAN Matters. Hal ini bermakna bagaimana Indonesia dengan keketuaannya tetap menjadi ASEAN yang relevan dan penting, berketahanan, adaptif, inklusif, tidak saja bagi rakyat Indonesia, tetapi juga bagi rakyat ASEAN dan di luar ASEAN. Elemen kedua adalah Epicentrum of Growth. Indonesia ingin ASEAN tetap memerankan peran sentral, sehingga dapat menjadi motor dan dapat berkontribusi bagi stabilitas dan perdamaian kawasan termasuk Indo-Pasifik. Hadirin yang saya hormati, pada Keketuaan Indonesia tahun 2023 terdapat 16 prioritas capaian ekonomi atau Priority Economic Deliverables di bawah pilar Komunitas Ekonomi ASEAN yang terdiri dari 3 strategic thrust, yaitu pemulihan, pembangunan kembali, ekonomi digital, dan berkelanjutan. Adapun 7 dari prioritas tersebut merupakan prioritas capaian ekonomi Indonesia di bawah tanggung jawab Menteri Ekonomi ASEAN dan telah disahkan pada pertemuan Menteri Ekonomi ASEAN bulan Maret 2023 yang lalu. Hadirin yang saya hormati, Keketuaan Indonesia masih berjalan hingga akhir tahun dan terdapat beberapa agenda yang harus dituntaskan. Dalam hal ini, peran Kementerian Perdagangan sangat strategis sebagai focal point di pilar ekonomi. Oleh karena itu, mari kita bekerja sama dan berkolaborasi untuk mendukung pencapaian prioritas ekonomi Indonesia sehingga Keketuaan Indonesia dapat mendorong pertumbuhan ekonomi dan perdagangan Indonesia serta kawasan. Akhirnya, terima kasih atas dukungan seluruh pihak pada Keketuaan Indonesia. Semoga dialog antara pemerintah, para pakar, akademisi, praktisi, dan institusi think tank dapat memberikan rekomendasi kebijakan untuk ekonomi dan perdagangan ASEAN menuju visi Indonesia Emas dan ASEAN 2045. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Menteri Perdagangan Dr. Honoris Causa Zulkifli Hasan, SEMM. Demikian. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Bapak Kasan, for the opening speech and for welcoming everyone in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, moving right along, we will listen to the remarks from the Deputy Secretary General of the ASEAN Economic Community, but unfortunately, His Excellency Satvinder Singh is unable to be here today. However, we are fortunate that he has graciously prepared a recorded speech that we can all benefit from. So let us listen to the speech from His Excellency Satvinder Singh.
Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from the ASEAN Secretariat. I'm extremely pleased to address all of you here today at the high-level policy dialogue. Let me first commend the organizers, particularly the Trade Policy Agency of the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. I would also like to acknowledge a big thank you to ERIA and the International Trade Analysis and Policy Studies of the IPB University for all of us coming together in hosting this high-level policy dialogue with the team, Indonesia's ASEAN Chairmanship 2023, and the focus on promoting ASEAN's relevance in the global market. Although I'm not able to attend the event physically, please allow me to share some of my thoughts on the synergy between the Indonesian initiatives under its ASEAN Chairmanship, as well as how all of these initiatives, one way or another, are strengthening the global ASEAN strategy, which seeks to further integrate the ASEAN economic community not only regionally in ASEAN, but also with the global community. On the onset, I would like to congratulate first to Indonesia for its leadership in the ASEAN Chairmanship year of 2023 with the theme of ASEAN Matters, the Epicentrum of Growth, and it has 3 strategic thrusts. First on recovery and rebuilding, second on digital economy, and the third on sustainability. We all know that these 3 strategic thrusts, illustrated by the priority economic deliverables under Indonesia's chairmanship, all of these underpin our regional commitment for a much stronger ASEAN economic community that is resilient, that's innovative, that's forward-looking, that's inclusive, that's sustainable, and definitely relevant to the 21st century global economic landscape. As we reflect upon the year 2023, ASEAN definitely finds itself in a historical juncture, witnessing really what you are beginning to see is global economic challenges emerging from the pandemic, which again has transformed the landscape that combines the contrasting colors of vibrant opportunities, and that's of course interwoven with a somber shadow of significant global challenges, be it inflation, whether it's going to be supply chain disruptions, and again food security, energy resilience. I think these are all issues all coming together at one time and confronting the region. The convergence of digital technologies and of course sustainable development has again ushered a profound change to our society in ASEAN, and also is really kind of influencing the way how we are going to start planning for policies in the coming years. While of course we all know the geopolitical tensions looming at large are also threatening the security and stability of the regional supply chains. Now, in this context, the theme that we're going to be discussing today, ASEAN Matters, the Epicentrum of Growth, really has signified our unwavering commitments to fostering a much more integrated ASEAN economy that is open, that's inclusive, that's forward-looking, and relevant to our business communities. This integrated approach has unlocked the vast potential of ASEAN as a collective economic force, propelling, as you know, our region's combined GDP today, which stands around 3.6 trillion, and of course positioning our economic bloc as the 5th largest economic global bloc in the world. Indeed, our economic performance over the past few years have been fairly decent. I would say it has outpaced many other regions in the world. Specifically, GDP have grown by is expected to grow by impressive 4.6% in 2023, and we are going to grow once again by 4.9% in 2024. All this reflecting adjustments made due to global conditions. Again, all of this reflects our region's resilience and our adaptability in navigating economic uncertainties globally. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the power of ASEAN is fortified by our entrenched principles of centrality, solidarity, and surely our ability to adapt to the evolving global landscape, thus ensuring our ability to meet with all of the coming challenges. This what I call this inherent ability to be able to adapt is truly evident through a whole myriad of strategies and initiatives across sectors. Let me share with you some of it. I think first, we've consistently in ASEAN pursued an open regionalism approach by upgrading our free trade agreements of the ASEAN, and we see them as pivotal steps in fostering our region's position as the hub of global supply chains. While the rest of the world and many global economies have pursued deglobalization, ASEAN is showing the world of tangible benefits of open global markets. Now, despite the difficult last 3 years of COVID-19 pandemic, our region have proven to the world that its past recovery in both ASEAN trade and as well as in our investment sectors, which today are surpassing even our pre-pandemic levels. Today, total trade stands around 3.8 trillion, while foreign direct investments last year amounted to $224 billion. Not only is ASEAN economic community pushing for open global markets, currently we are also embarking on upgrading many of our trade agreements, and some of these are with some of the most significant trade partners. In these negotiations, the Ministries of Economy of ASEAN, they have guided the negotiators to incorporate new provisions and some of the best practices of ASEAN, and have guided to ensure that our upgraded agreements that we are wanting to work hard on will remain relevant and these agreements remain forward-looking, they are modern, and a lot more responsive to regional and global developments. Notably, as you know, ASEAN has also launched 4 upgraded negotiations this year, including the ASEAN-Australia and New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, which is being completed this year, and it's going to be endorsed by the economic ministers of ASEAN next month. Meanwhile, ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement ATIGA, which is in progress, the upgrade is actually in progress. This is really the most important FTA, and we hope that the upgraded version would incorporate the new generation of critical enhancements that will help us further integrate the region into the global economy in a much more competitive way. The good news is that the guiding principles agreed upon by the economic ministers, these guiding principles already sanction negotiators to push hard on the card of important transformative critical issues such as circularity and the seamless flow of goods across borders. Of course, more to come. As you know, I've said there is going to be the ASEAN-China FTA upgrade. There's also going to be the ASEAN-India FTA upgrade, as well as, of course, the ASEAN-Japan FTA upgrade. Additionally, nothing shows much more of the symbolic significance of ASEAN leadership in the open global trade than our ASEAN-led RCEP FTA agreement, which all of you know is one of the largest and also one of the most comprehensive FTAs in the world. ASEAN-led RCEP has been ratified and has been implemented by all of the 15 signatories. All of these endeavors surely reinforce the ASEAN position as the enabler for global businesses to diversify their trade and investment activities along the global supply chain, especially across the Asia-Pacific region. We are seeing actually today real economic investments coming, where global OEMs are coming to the region, reorganizing their global supply chains in Southeast Asia, in order for them to be able to manage some of the geopolitical challenges as well as the sustainable decarbonization challenges they face. RCEP is today strengthening, and we see the setup of the RCEP Secretariat as a special unit in the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta coming into motion on the 1st of January as again one of the strong positive motions forward. This is, as you know, is one of Indonesia's priority economic deliverables for its chairmanship this year. Moreover, we are also beginning to anticipate new member states interested to join the ASEAN-led RCEP FTA. For example, both Hong Kong and Sri Lanka are pursuing interest for accession into RCEP. I believe we are going to see more nations in the coming years also exploring RCEP. Second, we recognize the transformative role of digital technologies in driving innovation, especially driving productivity and thereby unlocking substantive regional growth. The forthcoming launch of the Digital Economic Framework Agreement, we call it in short DEFA, in September of this year. It's truly one of the most remarkable achievements of ASEAN under Indonesia's chairmanship. The launch of DEFA is indeed one of the critical priority economic deliverables of Indonesia. The ASEAN DEFA will stand as a legally binding agreement providing a comprehensive regulatory framework as well as an infrastructure foundation for a single digital economy within ASEAN region. I believe no region in the world at this stage has pursued such a comprehensive digital agreement. I know the world is watching ASEAN. And according to the analysis of our consultants, the Boston Consulting Group that done the study on the DEFA, the value of the ASEAN digital economy, which at current trajectories could be worth about 1 trillion by 2030. And according to the analysis, is that with an effective comprehensive DEFA, ASEAN would have the ability to double this value to close to about 1.9 to 2 trillion US dollars. Once again, underscoring the vital role of digital technology in bolstering the regional dynamism and competitiveness in the global economy, thus embracing again digital transformation, which will position ASEAN as a progressive regional bloc in the long term, contributing to global trade. Third, we are also committing and embracing, under the year of Indonesian chairmanship, the imperative of carbon neutrality and a sustainable future for ASEAN. Now, this is reflected fundamental, in the fundamental, what I call paradigm shift in our policy making in order to kind of support our member states' endeavor to pursue a common and a credible path in meeting their SDG goals. In 2023, ASEAN is charting this ambitious course towards a much greener future through the adoption of both the ASEAN Strategy for Carbon Neutrality as well as the ASEAN Framework for Blue Economy. Now, both of these efforts, along with our existing ASEAN Circular Economy implementation plans, they all represent a fundamental departure from a fragmented bisectoral approach to ensure coherence to ASEAN's sustainability journey. Now, through a combination of sector-specific and cross-cutting initiative, we in ASEAN aim to integrate the sustainability principles into our regional economic integration while considering all the diverse circumstances of member states. In conjunction with the sectoral initiatives such as on the publication of the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Development Goals, this is for sustainable finance, there is a version of 2.0, as well as there's also work on the roadmap of ASEAN harmonized standards to support sustainable development goals. Together with what I've spoken, the ASEAN Framework on Blue Economy and the Framework on Circular Economy, we are truly poised to accelerate an inclusive, consolidated transition towards a carbon neutral economy for our region, and thus fostering sustainable growth and trade competitiveness for all member states. It's estimated that by 2050, the transition of carbon neutrality could contribute up to $5.3 trillion in value add to our economies in ASEAN and attract another $6 to $7 trillion in green investments. Moreover, this transformative journey is expected to generate up to 66 million jobs by 2050, empowering our region, our people, and improving our livelihoods. Last but not least, I just want to also share, we are also in the region at the AEC committed to an inclusive growth strategy that prioritizes the effective participation of MSMEs and the development and the transformativeness of human resources. Now, this strategy is essential catalyst to ensure the relevance of ASEAN in digital and sustainable future. Now, recognizing the MSMEs, we know they are the backbone of our economy. More than 95% of them are SMEs and are microeconomies in companies in our ecosystem. We all know that they're particularly vulnerable to the transformations, and we have to pay extra attention. ASEAN, we have taken steps to empower them. In fact, for the last 2 years, we have been providing training courses for 4,300 people through the ASEAN MSME Academy, as well as we have trained more than 230,000 trainees in the Go Digital platform. All this to equip the MSMEs, employers, and workers with necessary skills and knowledge to prepare the workforce and to be able for them to thrive in a dynamic and competitive labor market. Now, in conjunction with a similar national effort, these programs, they offer powerful solutions to SMEs for the redeployment and for their reskilling, and also for the upskilling of the professionals and workers, just to ensure there is a just and equitable transition amongst the ASEAN communities. In the coming year, we will be working hard to embrace collective effort to strengthen microfinance ecosystems and to also help build much stronger alternative finance liquidity and bankability for our micro and SME firms. And I think this is a critical element of the success of our communities in the ASEAN. Now, all of these collective inclusive endeavors, they really illustrate our vision of building a community of opportunities for all. Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'm really proud to emphasize that ASEAN does not only retain its prominence, but also thrives as the epicentrum of growth on the global stage, thanks to the tireless efforts of the ASEAN member states at both the regional and national levels. The ASEAN economic integration definitely has undergone active transformation, allowing us to adapt and to maintain our ASEAN continued relevance to the ever-changing global market, especially as we look toward a digital and sustainable future. And in this context, let me take the opportunity to underscore the crucial role of Indonesia as the chair of ASEAN, who has spared no effort to sustain our progress towards that future. To this end, I truly hope this forum it serves as a fertile ground for nurturing ideas that will significantly contribute to policy formulation in ASEAN as we are truly forging a path of prosperity, sustainability, and inclusivity for our region. Wish you all a very successful discussion.
Give round of applause to extend our heartfelt appreciation to His Excellency Satvinder Singh for his dedication, effort in ensuring their insight reach us, underscoring their commitment to our event even in his absence. Thank you very much, His Excellency. Next, we will listen to the remarks from the President of ERIA. Please welcome on the stage with a big round of applause, Professor Tetsuya Watanabe.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Kasan, on behalf of His Excellency His Excellency Minister of Trade of Indonesia, Mr. Zarkin Hassan, His Excellency Bapak Engariciasto Lukita, I'm sorry. Executive Chairman of B Universe, former Minister of Trade of Indonesia, His Excellency Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for Economic Community, Mr. Savindra Singh, Professor Jean Grossman, Professor of International Economics, Princeton University, Professor Irfan, Dean of IPB, honorable chairs and speakers, and distinguished officials and delegates, academic and business representatives, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ERIA, I would like to express my sincere gratitude in welcoming all of you to this high-level policy dialogue for Indonesia's ASEAN Chairmanship 2023, ASEAN Digital Community 2045. It is my immense pleasure and honor to stand before all of you today as we gather here at this momentous event. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the Indonesian Ministry of Trade, International Trade and Policy Studies, ADBI, SMERU Research Institute, and my colleagues from area teams to their exceptional efforts organizing this event. The objective of this high-level forum dialogue are both clear and crucial to engage in discussion on ASEAN priorities during Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship in 2023, emphasizing the importance of collaboration and consultation among diverse stakeholders. As we embark on Indonesian ASEAN chairmanships, it is imperative we unite our endeavors to enhance economic outcomes, facilitate post-pandemic recovery, and foster robust cooperation and collaboration within the ASEAN community. In recent years, ASEAN has witnessed significant digital transformation characterized by the implementation of targeted initiatives, frameworks, and various agreements, as Sabindra Singh mentioned. These endeavors are aimed at fostering a prosperous and inclusive digital environment throughout the region. Sustained collective efforts are essential to address the significant challenges associated with integrating ASEAN digital economy. The challenges include fragmented digital and physical connectivity, insufficient productivity, and underdeveloped value-added sectors, and the governance of digital economy, and persistent digital device. It is crucial we work together to overcome these challenges and navigate dynamic digital era. By creating a harmonized digital ASEAN community, this region can unlock the full potential of digital transformation while ensuring inclusivity across all member states. This initiative will enable ASEAN to harness digital technology for economic growth, social well-being, and regional integration. To achieve these goals, it is crucial to prioritize strategic investments, establish robust frameworks and regulations, and foster collaborative efforts among ASEAN's different stakeholders. Through the collaborative endeavors toward the shared objectives and goals, the establishment of ASEAN digital community will empower the region and foster sustainable and inclusive growth, leading to a promising future for all in the digital ASEAN era. Before concluding, I would like to affirm ERIA's unwavering commitment. I'm a new president, newly elected, but I renew my personal and strong commitment to serve for the ASEAN and ASEAN member states and the people living in this region. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you very much, Professor Tetsuya Watanabe. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we will move to the next agenda. But before that, let me remind you that you are all encouraged to access the seminar materials that will be available digitally. And to access them, you can simply scan the QR code displayed on the screen. And you also have the QR code provided on your ID card. You may see on your ID card. So this QR code will grant you access to the presentation slides and also Q&A link, which you can use to submit your questions during the Q&A session in each plenary session. So this will also provide you the Q&A link, which you can use to submit your questions during the Q&A session in each plenary session. We also encourage the online participants to be engaged to the discussion by submitting their questions through this link. All right, and this link will also provide you with evaluation form that can be filled in to get an e-certificate, which will be sent directly via your email. All right, before we begin the plenary session, we will take a picture together. So please, we would like to invite to come on the stage Dr. Irfan Syauqi Bey as the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Management, IPB University. Dr. Doanti Tanha, economist from ERIA. We also would like to invite Professor Tetsuya Watanabe, the President of ERIA. Dr. Kasan, Head of Trade Policy Agency, Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Enggar Tiasto Lukita, Executive Chairman B Universe and also former Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Professor Jean Grossman, Professor of International Economics from Princeton University. Dr. Lily Yan Ing, Lead Advisor for Southeast Asia region from ERIA. Dr. Sahara, Director of ITAPS IPB University. And also Mr. Asep Suryahadi from SMERU Research Institute. And after this, we would like to invite all the chairs and speakers, so please be ready to take a picture together. All right, we're gonna have the photo session on my count in 3, 2, 1. All right, one more time, please. 3, 2, 1. Next, we would like to invite all the chairs and speakers to join on the stage. Please come to the stage, Dr. Jean Baldwin Grossman from Princeton University. Dr. Maria Monica Wiharja, Visiting Fellow, ICS Yusof Ishak Institute. Dr. Gok Sunju, Chief Skills Officer, Skills Future Singapore. Dr. Fauzia Zen, Senior Economist from ERIA. Dr. Reza Yamora Siregar, Head Senior Executive Vice President from Indonesia Financial Group Progress. Brian A. Wong, Advisor from Alibaba Global Initiative. Fitria Irmi Triswati, Group Head of Retail Payment System and also Director from Bank Indonesia. Dr. Han Pumin, Senior Energy Economist from ERIA. Associate Professor Dr. Nora Sikin Ahmad Ludin, Deputy Director University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Dr. Le Tai Ha, Managing Director at FinFuture Prize from FinFuture Foundation. And also Dr. Aloysius Joko Purwanto as Energy Economist from ERIA. Please join on the stage as we are going to have a photo session together. All right, ready? On my count in 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Can we have a free pose session? So, yeah, free pose. 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You may return to your seat. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the next agenda, which is the most anticipated agenda for today's event. We will start the plenary session right at this time. But before that, let me inform you once again about the QR code provided on your ID card. By scanning the QR code, you will have the access to all the materials in this event, which consists of presentation slides from the speakers, Q&A link, which you can use to submit your questions during the Q&A session in each plenary session. We also encourage all the online participants to be engaged to the discussion by submitting your questions during the Q&A session. And also in this link, we also provide an evaluation form that can be filled in to get an e-certificate, which will be sent directly via your email. All right. I think we are all ready to start the plenary session for today. Of course, in this plenary session, we have arranged the expert speakers, as you may see on the screen before, on the opening session, on the opening ceremony. So we will have the plenary session before the lunch break, and then after the lunch break, we also have breakout session that you can follow, after the lunch break. So I think we are all ready, and let's start the plenary session. Therefore, we would like to invite Lead Advisor for Southeast Asia region from ERIA, Dr. Lily Yan Ing. To Dr. Lily Yan Ing, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Excellency Minister Lukita, Dr. Kasan Muhri, Professor Watanabe, Professor Grossman, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of us. It's such a great pleasure to be here. In today's discussions, we're gonna highlight the importance of robots, AI, and digitalizations in ASEAN. And it's really good to see human smile in this room. Before I start, let me share with you two facts. First, I'm a natural human. I was born and delivered by organic parents. But soon, most of goods and services will be produced, operated, and delivered to us by robots and AI. It's gonna change the way not only we work, but the way we live. The second fact, it took 75 years for telephones to get 100 million users, but it took only 2 months for ChatGPT to get 100 million users. And now ChatGPT has 1.8 billion users every month. So that's how massive the power, and that's how rapid the power of robots and AI and digitalizations that's gonna change, that's gonna bring us to a new economic era. Then, but how robots, AI, and digitalizations will gonna affect the world economy? Next. First, on productivity, the adoptions of robots, AI, and digitalizations have shown positive impact on productivity, both at the firm and the aggregate levels. Industrial robots and AI systems have contributed to significant increase in productivity by enabling more accurate and precise work processes and thus reduces production costs. I'm taking examples, a study in Indonesia. Workers in automating firms are 49% more productive than in non-automating firms. So robots and AI to produce more outputs, produce higher level of productivities, and they tend to also have higher exports, offering markets with a greater, more variety and higher quality products. Next, on trade. The adoptions of robots and AI and digitalizations facilitates trade in goods and services. When developed countries adopt robots and AI, it has impacts on trade with developing countries. Another examples, an increase of 10% in robots density in developed countries is associated with an increase of 12% in exports from developing countries. Larger and more globally connected firms in developing countries are more likely to adopt robots and AI and digitalizations, which allow them to expand their markets. Furthermore, the greater deployments of robots, AI, and digitalizations leads to increase in trade and services, which ultimately will increase overall trade. Next, robots and AI and digitalizations will affect labors in three ways. First, displacement effect. Routine work will be replaced by robots and AI and digital technologies. Those will have negative effect, particularly on unskilled and relatively less skilled workers through displacement mechanisms. Second, productivity effects. Robots and AI will have positive effects on labor and wages by improve firms' productions and competitiveness. Third, reinstatement effects. Robots, AI, and digital technologies reinstates workers into a broader range of tasks that the task contents in favor of skilled labors. Next, in conclusions, considering positive impacts of robots, AI, and digital technologies on the world economy through improved productivity, trade, and creations of new skills, the forthcoming technological developments in robotics, AI, and digitalizations need to be welcomed, not discouraged. However, we should take a note. With the current AI neuron systems, AI is more knowledgeable than any human on Earth. AI neuron systems works 125,000 times faster than human brain. We are reminded by AI godfathers and founders that if AI falls into irresponsible hands, it will pose significant challenges to human extinctions. Thus, we need to ensure resources and capacity of developments should be balanced by safeguards and regulations on robots, AI, and digitalizations. Along with the developments of this, it is our responsibility to ensure that they are human-centric and designed to improve human welfare. We look very much forward to having discussions with you. I welcome easy questions. You can give the difficult ones to AI. But if AI cannot answer your questions, you can give it to our speaker. He is the guru of international trade, one of the most respected, well-known authors. He wrote a book on innovations and growth back to 1991, before AI was invented. He is my writing guru. He is my best friend. Please welcome the one and only Professor Gene Grossman from Princeton University.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to be here to share some thoughts today on the future of globalization. It's my first opportunity to visit Indonesia, so I'm very grateful to the organizers for making that possible, and I'm very grateful to have this esteemed audience to share my thoughts with. These are very difficult times for globalization, or as the chief economist at the WTO said at a recent conference, the house is on fire. A false narrative has developed in recent years that trade is responsible for all manner of ills in the world today, including supply chain fragility, adverse environmental impacts of climate change, income inequality, and even geopolitical instability. Somehow, along the way, many have forgotten the role that trade has played in improving standards of living and lifting millions out of poverty. Today is a time of fraught politics, populism, nationalist attitudes, rise of illiberal trade policies, and the risk of a global decoupling that will separate the world potentially into two or more trading blocs. So as a trade economist, these are very concerning developments, to say the least. The Global Trade Alert keeps track of trade measures, and as you can see on the figure here, the number of illiberal trade policies arising since the mid-2010s has grown dramatically after a period long period of liberalization. We're seeing increased use of subsidies with a very nationalist intent and content protection clauses that require domestic purchases to take advantage of the subsidies. One evidence of this trend is on the slide that I show you here. The number of countervailing measures that have been taken against subsidies in recent years is very much on the rise. And the WTO is at a critical point in its history, suffering from a legitimacy crisis, whether it really has the authority or should have the authority to set the agenda on trade policy for the world. We're seeing very few new multilateral initiatives since the failure of the Doha round. We've seen the demise of the dispute settlement procedures, which, though flawed, were very successful in keeping the world in a rules-based trading system that seems to be very much breaking apart, thanks in no small part to my former president. So the question has been raised whether deglobalization is well on its way. In fact, some would point to this slide that you see here to suggest that deglobalization began with the financial crisis in 2008. So while it is true, as you see on the chart, that the share of world trade, which in 1960 was 19% of global GDP, rose to 50% in 2008 and peaked at that time and is now fallen off to 2020. In 2020 to 42%. Some would point to this figure as suggesting that, in fact, the recent events are just a continuation of events that began with the global crisis. I would dispute that. If you look deeper into the figures, 60% of the fall in the share of trade in global GDP is due to fuels and minerals, and 100% of that fall is due to changes in commodity prices. So actually 60% of the fall in trade to GDP is not due to a decline in trade, but rather an easing of commodity prices that took place after 2008. Of the remaining 40%, most of it is in manufacturers, and I think there's a lesson here, but it's a lesson that is not the one that many people are drawing. The lesson is that we saw something remarkable in the period between 1995 and 2008, namely an ICT-fueled lengthening of supply chains that facilitated a global production processes and a boom of offshoring, which fed the numbers of trade. That process has probably run its course. I think there's an important lesson here I'll come back to. That process has run its course as we've moved from an equilibrium with very little offshoring because of the difficulty of doing so to quite a bit of offshoring, but there are limits to how much of that is possible. And so you see on the chart, for example, the share of value added in gross production, an indication of how many times output is being turned over in the course of producing final goods. A steep decline, especially in the early 2000s, but very much a leveling off since then. So global trade is not as yet on the decline, although the trade in goods share has certainly seemed to have peaked. On the other hand, decoupling of their last few years since the trade war initiated by President Trump is very much a real thing. Many of us had hoped that President Biden would come in and swiftly undo the mistakes that the Trump administration made on the trade front. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. The Biden policies are not very different from the Trump policies, perhaps a friendly or a very friendlier face, but as much or more nationalism and protectionism as before. President Trump, in his candidacy, has doubled down on his anti-trade positions. At the CPAC meetings, he proposed universal baseline tariffs against all Chinese goods imported into the United States, a phase out of all essential goods within 4 years, and to strip China of its MFN status. So Biden has been bad. Trump is promising worse. Congress is no better, I'm afraid. Both parties have adopted a confrontational approach, an anti-trade approach in general, and a confrontational approach with China for trade in particular. And public survey data suggest that voters have little enthusiasm for trade or further liberalization these days. So as the last bullet point says there, trade economists such as myself are very much isolated on this issue these days. What form might decoupling take if it continues? Well, we've already seen a number of these measures, continued or even higher tariffs on goods trade, increasing use of non-tariff barriers. Industrial policies are the rage in the US and Europe these days, all of them with a very nationalist intent, build domestically, all of them suggesting that we should reshore or friendshore or other such suggestions of more limited trade. On the technology side, perhaps even more frightening, a suggestion that we should limit the spread of technology around the world, which, as my work on innovation and growth many years ago suggests, is the way in which trade has its strongest empirical effects on growth and prosperity. Is the decoupling having any effect on goods trade? I would suggest yes. First, if you look at this figure for trade U.S. imports from China of goods that are not subject to Trump tariffs, what this suggests is the underlying health of the U.S.-China trade relationship if it were left on its own. So imports from China of these goods that are not subject to tariffs are very much keeping track with imports from the rest of the world, but very different story for the goods that are subject to the Trump tariffs, where imports from China have fallen off a cliff and have been replaced to some large extent by imports from the rest of the world, and especially from other countries in Asia. If you'll allow me one set of regression results, here's some figures from a very recent paper of mine, which looks at how, looking across goods, imports of goods into the U.S. from China has been affected by the relative tariffs on imports from China relative to the rest of Asia in the first column, and then in the second column, how imports from the rest of Asia have responded to those very same tariffs on China. You can see a large and very statistically significant negative effect of the Trump tariffs on imports from China, and at the same time, and encouragingly perhaps, a positive impact of those tariffs on imports from the rest of Asia, and here Vietnam may be the biggest beneficiary of the Trump policy. If this decoupling continues, what does it portend? I would suggest nothing good. I would suggest substantial costs. I first wrote both sides, but then amended that to all sides, because it's not just the US and China that are affected by this decoupling, but in fact, as the world divides into two blocks, the spillover effects on the rest of the world are as substantial, or in the case of many emerging market countries, even more substantial than the effects on US and China, which are large and mostly insulated economy. There's been a number of research studies, I'll show you on the next couple of slides, that show that the effects would be substantial. The deeper the disintegration, the greater the costs, but that technological decoupling of the sort associated with the limited spread of technology is what we should be perhaps most afraid of. So given my limited time, I won't go through these numbers with you, other than suggest that some of the best trade modelers have been modeling the effect, predicting the effects that decoupling would have on welfare in the United States and China. These three studies all have to do with different scenarios of continued separation of goods trade between either US and China, or a US bloc and a Chinese bloc. And the welfare effects, as you see in the last column, are notable. Both the US and China would suffer, China the more so. But these two studies bring into the modeling an assumption that there would be technological decoupling as well, a slowdown of the spread of technology around the world. And here the numbers are much larger, 3 to 5 times larger than the ones if we only consider the trade in the goods, and the effects on the rest of the world, which I guess I haven't put in the slide here, are even more substantial. So reason to be concerned if this trend towards decoupling continues. Let me shift gears with my reigning time, given the theme of the conference, and talk about services. Goods trade has probably run its course, at least in terms of expansion and liberalization. Service trade is what I see as the future of world trade and the future of globalization as it continues. You can see on the left-hand side that service trade at a percentage of GDP continues to grow apace throughout the period, even with only the smallest dip during the pandemic. Service trade as a percentage of all trade has risen from 16% in 1980 to more than 23% more recently. Especially important are intermediate services, services used as intermediate inputs, not only into goods production, but also service production and agriculture. So service inputs are used throughout the economy, as I'll show you in a slide or two. So intermediate services in the blue on the left are really where the action is taking place. Trade and final services are fairly flat. And on the right-hand side, emphasizing that commercial services or business services are growing much more rapidly, notably more rapidly than trade in goods. Intermediate services, as I say, I believe is the future of trade, or the future of trade growth. In any case, these are all the tasks that are done for businesses, not delivered directly to consumers, though include everything from bookkeeping to accounting to online client help, call centers, and so on and so forth. These are services done for other businesses. Okay, let me skip that. And So far, services have been dominated by the developed countries. You can see here that 64% of service exports in blue are undertaken by developed countries. India and China, between them, 10%, and the rest of the world, 25%. But I collected these numbers to show you that, in fact, service trade and especially intermediate service exports are growing twice as fast in the non-OECD countries as compared to the OECD countries. And the orange one, information and commercial services, is where the growth in the non-OECD countries is the fastest. So this is quite optimistic. Lower and middle income countries have increased their share of global exports of digitally delivered services from 17% in 2001 to 31% in 2021. And I guess these numbers are probably too small for you to see, but if you could see them, they would show that digitally delivered services are especially important in developing Asia, accounting for 41% of service exports by developing Asian economies. So the theme of this Indonesian presidency of ASEAN is very much in tune with the facts that we see on the ground in terms of digital service trade. I offer Bangladesh as an example that this is not only an opportunity for the more advanced of the emerging market economies, but also for a country like Bangladesh, which is not a more advanced emerging economy. Bangladesh has experienced a 15% annual growth rate of digitally delivered services over a period extending almost 2 decades, and now accounts for 14% of online freelance global workforce in the world economy. So Bangladesh can be held up as an example that it can be done even in a relatively poor economy with the proper policies and the proper investments in infrastructure. Demand for intermediate services is robust. These are figures that Richard Baldwin collected for France, and they show that service intermediate goods account for 30% of French GDP, but imports of services account for only 4%. So there's ample room in France and in other countries for service imports to grow, and the demand for intermediate services is much greater than the demand for manufactured intermediate goods or indeed any other sort of goods at all. And on the supply side, the emerging markets are well placed to become the suppliers of digitally delivered services, such as Bangladesh is doing. So you can see here in the blue the jobs in the business service sector in different set of developing countries, and there's lots of labor supply there that could be turned to exports with the right policies and the right technological developments, which seem to be very much in the works. I think trade in intermediate services, and especially digitally delivered services, is likely to continue to grow fast for several reasons outlined here. First, although the barriers to service trade are high, most of those barriers are in the form of regulations. They're not in the form of tariffs or other direct trade barriers, and they're mostly not technological. They're mostly regulatory barriers. And interestingly and importantly, very little of the regulation is directed to intermediate services like back office jobs, copy editing, HR, marketing, IT services. Most of these regulations have to do with finance and the like. Second, Digitech is lowering the technological barriers to trade and intermediate services at an explosive pace. And Lily pointed to this in her introductory remarks. One important development of AI is the rapid improvement of machine translation. Machine translation will allow workers throughout the globe who don't speak English well to participate with the help of AI translation. Improvements in telecommunications, partly accelerated by COVID-19, have made it more, not costless to have non-face-to-face meetings, but easier to have non-face-to-face meetings. And I'm told that within a few years, we will be able to have digital meetings with holograms where we'll sit around a table and our colleagues will be sitting next to us in hologram form, and we can read their body language and facial expressions, and it'll be much more of an experience like actually having them in the room. As I say, the capacity for expansion of digitally delivered services and intermediate services more general in the emerging markets is very great. A substantial wage gap still exists for professions, for managers, technicians, and et cetera, and others professionals as between the developed countries and the emerging markets. So the incentive for wage savings on that front is there. And the improvements in telecommunications will make it easier and more feasible for professionals in India, in the rest of Asia, in the rest of the world, to participate in global provision of global supply chains that are more geared on services rather than goods. As you know, the last 20 or 30 years of growth, especially in the Asian miracle economies, has been fueled by an export-led goods export strategy. Is that the future? I would suggest not. As I said, goods trade has more or less peaked as a share of overall trade. Automation is fighting against it, is lowering labor costs or the need for labor in the developed economies, and so there's less incentive to offshore to low-wage economies if robots can do the same job. Manufacturing is increasingly jobless and increasingly non-traded, and on top of that, the political trends, as I said, are worrisome. The developed countries are becoming more protectionist vis-a-vis good trade. On the other hand, I think there's plenty of room for trade in services to grow. I list a number of the reasons here. There are relatively small-scale economies in the provision of these services. Geographic distance is less important. You don't have to ship a good halfway across the world. You can ship somebody's voice in a fraction of a second over the internet. Language differences still matter, but less so with the rapid improvements in AI. The technological barriers are disappearing, as I suggested, so that face-to-face interactions, while still important in many services, are increasingly less so. And so the lower labor costs for professional and technicians in the emerging markets will translate into a competitive advantage, increasingly so, if allowed to take root. So finally, to wrap, what sorts of policies would I suggest to promote continued expansion of service trade, intermediate service trade, and especially digitally delivered service trade? Well, of course, we'll need investments in digital infrastructure. We'll need affordable and reliable connectivity, open and transparent telecommunications markets, protection against cyber crimes, and the like. Security will become increasingly important. Second, countries wanting to take advantage of the opportunities will need to simplify their regulation of services. Each service, especially in finance, but as I said, across the board, there's a morass of regulatory impediments that could be very much streamlined. Countries have rightly concerns about privacy and data protection. Unfortunately, countries have gone their own way in terms of their own policies and regulations. A lot more coordination would make it possible for countries to do business more easily in commercial services. I'd like to see services brought into multilateral and regional trade agreements, and that is happening to the extent that we're seeing any new trade agreements in recent years. Most of them, or all of them, are focusing on the service side of the economy. We'll need training, of course, skills that are complementary to AI rather than substitutes. So ChatGPT will be able to do more and more of the simple tasks, but that doesn't mean that the need for humans is disappearing. It just changes the type of task that humans will be called upon to do, and those that are complementary to AI will be the ones that thrive. And finally, we'll need an adjustment policy, as we do in any time of economic turbulence. And what I would emphasize here is that it'll be a different adjustment policy than what we're used to. Over the last 20, 30, 100 years, adjustment for workers has focused on industries. I think the adjustment policies of the future will need to focus on occupations as different types of occupations. Wherever those workers might be working will be differentially affected according to the extent to which their services they provide can be provided digitally and easily exported. So just to conclude, this is a very scary time for globalization. There are trends going on that have me very concerned. I wish I could say that I think they will reverse themselves soon. I don't feel comfortable saying that at all, and that might be a US-centric position. The speech we heard from the ASEAN director was much more optimistic in that regard, but these are very concerning times. But I think service trade is really offers us an opportunity to get back on track and offers us an opportunity to further the benefits of trade to improve society and living standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please remain on the stage, and you are invited to have a seat on the sofa because we are going to continue to the next session, which is the plenary session. So ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to the next session, and to guide this plenary session, we invite the economist from ERIA, Dr. Doanti Tanha, to guide the plenary session. All right, Mrs. Doanti Tanha, you may take over the session.
Thank you very much. So good morning to our distinguished guests and participants. Thank you very much, Professor Grossman, for a very enlightening and forward-looking presentation. Now I would like to invite our next speaker to the stage. We are very delighted to have His Excellency Pak Enggar Tiasto Lukita, who is Executive Chairman of B Universe, former Minister of Trade, Republic of Indonesia. He's going to share his regional perspective on ASEAN cooperation and integration. Pak Enggar, the floor is yours.
Very good morning. Chair of the session, Dr. Duan Ha, Dr. Lili of ERIA, who is also the Secretary General of International Economic Association, Professor Jane Grossman of Princeton University, my colleagues, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start to sharing my thoughts, if I may give a comment of it, I just want to ask the ASEAN countries see the opportunity during this what raised by Professor Jen Hickman, because anyway, U.S. and China, both of them, they need it. But one thing, we have to be one. I mean, the ASEAN, we have to consolidate and we have to see the opportunity. It's not only take the profit, but it really helps the world trade, because I don't know and whether Professor Jen Hickman can see, we have to wait the election in US or not. Same, Democrat or Republic, I don't know. It's probably one of our curiosity about that. And regarding the AI, in 1931, a dystopian novel, Brave the World, by Aldous Huxley, warns the danger of any countries if we rely on the technology. It's not regarding the AI, but we can see it was written in 1931. And we remember the what we call it, the godfather of AI, who left Google, Jeffrey Hinton. And he warns also the AI is close to becoming more intelligent than humans. But anyway, we cannot stop it. So the Abu Lilis already give the perspective and how we can handle. I'm grateful that the previous speakers from the Secretary General of ASEAN, President of ERIA, Minister of Trade of Indonesia, delivered by Pak Kasan, Dr. Lili to Professor Grossman, all have shed light on current global and regional economic outlook. Some ideas have emerged at this point on how our high-level policy dialogue today may generate a set of policy recommendations to shape better economic deliverables this year in support of post-pandemic recovery and promote strong regionalism in ASEAN. So, I will be brief in sharing my thoughts on what is it that Indonesia should be focusing on to leave a big, long-lasting footprint on ASEAN's journey into the future. We all know very well, by now that the amalgamation of trade tensions between major economies, the global spread of COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, food and energy scarcities, and geopolitical rivalries to reshape the world order, all have brought digitalization and digital technology to the forefront of our daily life at a much faster pace. Under the ASEAN political security community, our expectation for how elections are run, how campaigning works online, and how we can and should communicate with one another have all changed to the massive use of digital technology. Such development in ASEAN and around the democratic world has prompted the Department of Politics and International Relations of the University of Sheffield to launch research on the fundamental impacts of digital technology on democratic politics. I do believe that the advancement of digital technology will further shape and reshape our democracy and systems of government. Meanwhile, the way in which military technology has advanced in recent years has become a new subject worthy of consideration by countries around the world. Conventional warfare is fading fast as hybrid strategies emerge utilizing automation and cyber programs. Robotics, Artificial intelligence and cyber warfare are at the forefront of innovation, giving way to the advancements of digital healthcare, automation for military personnel, hypersonic missiles, the Internet of Military Things, unmanned surveillance and combat systems, virtual reality and augmented reality within the ambit of immersive technologies, cyber warfare, collateral damage reduction, robotics and autonomous systems, military additive manufacturing, and so on and so forth. These advancements highlight the evolving landscape of military technology and its potential implication for defense and security. Under the ASEAN Economic Community, the use of digital technology in our economy is even much bolder and more observable. It is projected that the economic size of the digital economy in ASEAN will rise by 6.4 times, from 31 billion US dollar or 1.3% of GDP in 2015 to 197 billion US dollar or 8.5% of GDP by 2025. To support digital transformation, ASEAN has established a regulatory framework to manage its cooperation in crucial areas such as e-commerce, digital infrastructure and innovation, data governance, and cybersecurity. Some of the existing regulatory frameworks include the ASEAN ICT Master Plan 2020, the ASEAN Agreement on Electronic Commerce, and most recently, the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan, or DFAP 2019-2025, to support sustainable and inclusive digital economy in the region. Accelerating digital transformation requires specific measures targeting digital talent and skills. For this, ASEAN already enacted the ASEAN Declaration on Human Resources Development for a Changing World of Work. In order to promote digital skills and literacy and 21st century skills in basic education, technical and vocational education, and training or technical and vocational education and training or TVET, and higher education, and to reskill and upskill employment, including digital skills and creating job opportunities. But much more has to be done. Digital-related issues and challenges remain there, hindering the development of the digital ecosystem in ASEAN, which should be resilient, providing shields and solutions to future shocks, yet fair, equitable, and beneficial to all segments of our economies and societies. By tackling these issues head-on, ASEAN can foster an inclusive and sustainable digital environment that empowers all stakeholders and promotes shared prosperity. The role of digital technology in the further development of the ASEAN socio-cultural community cannot be underrated. One of the fundamental components of the UN's Sustainable Development 2030 agenda is quality education. It aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all, and digital technology has emerged as an essential tool to achieve this goal. This technology has shown a powerful impact on the education system. In fact, recent COVID-19 pandemic has significantly institutionalized the application of digital technology in education and made a paradigm shift in the entire education system. It is not only a knowledge provider, but also a co-creator of information, a mentor, and an assessor. Culture is not immune to the intervention of digital technology. It has encouraged skill development in web design, animation, graphic design, video production, augmented and virtual reality, and other emerging technologies, while integrating cultural, social, and historical perspectives, diverse methodologies, and inclusive frameworks. Digital technology has advanced more rapidly than any innovation in our history, reaching around 50% of the developing world's population in only 2 decades and significantly transforming societies. In fact, digital technology has become an important platform these days for cultural exchanges among communities. The integration of digital technology into cultural practices will not only enrich our collective experiences, but also will empower individuals and communities to participate more actively in the digital age. So, distinguished participants, it is my belief that this year under Indonesia's chairmanship, ASEAN needs to set off the process of defining a vision in an increasingly digitalized world. We may call this vision the ASEAN Digital Community 2045. To realize this, ASEAN may first focus on ensuring the development of a digital ecosystem under the ASEAN Economic Community, since works on this pillar have progressed significantly. What is needed is identifying quick wins, filling in gaps, and moving forward in a holistic manner. As works under the economic pillar progress, we may see faster development of digitalization under the other 2 pillars. This is especially the case since digital technology is traded. Its intellectual properties are protected. Its broad application and use require the right infrastructure and hence new investment. By recognizing the interdependence between digitalization and the 3 pillars of ASEAN community, we can harness the transformative power of digital technology to advance our political security, economic, and social cultural communities agenda, thus promoting economic growth, enhancing social well-being, and strengthen regional integration. Through strategic investments, robust regulatory frameworks, and collaborative efforts, ASEAN can position itself as a leader in the digital age and reap the benefits of a thriving digital ecosystem. Distinguished participants, I wish to raise the final point that I believe is highly relevant in today's ever-changing world. It is about giving a greater emphasis on taking ASEAN as a regional economic policy platform. It is my profound belief that economic integration will bring the benefits of greater size, international efficiency, and robustness to ASEAN economy as a whole, and to its individual memberships. This, in turn, will offer opportunities for economic stability and resilience, higher growth, and more employment. ASEAN has produced a bunch of agreements, protocols, understandings, procedures, standards, cooperation programs, and others. With a stronger role of digital technology, especially in the economic sphere, ASEAN must make adjustment and alignment of national policy and regulations with ASEAN-wide policies as conventional boundaries between states become more intangible than ever. Of course, we will continue to see national variations of ASEAN commitments as the member states are at the different levels of development. However, such adjustments and alignments are vital if we aspire to maintain ASEAN's solidity and responsiveness in face of challenges presented by the changing global economic order. Embracing digitalization and advancing digital economic integration will enable ASEAN to effectively respond to the dynamic of today's world and secure a positive trajectory for its economies. As the saying goes, it is not the bigger, but the faster ones who can stand the test of time. I think I should leave it there and save time for our Q&A section to have fruitful and inspiring discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful and very candid talk, Pak Lukita. So now we will be ready to start the Q&A session. I understand that we have listened to two excellent presentations from our speakers to have an idea of the world we are living in with a very heightened geopolitical tension, the backlash to free trade and how much it may cost, the rapid technological advancement. And most importantly, what lies ahead, the development trend and what ASEAN countries should do to connect the dot, to ride the wave and thrive. So I think the scene has been very well set, and we are now ready for the discussion. Just before we collect questions, I would like to mention a small housekeeping stuff. I understand that we are having on-site and online participants. So we are going to have two rounds of Q&As. The first one, we collect questions from our audience here. And the second round, we will have our team to compile questions from the online participants. Please kindly keep the questions short. And please introduce yourself, your name, and your institution. So with that, I would like to invite our first round of a discussion. Yeah, please, may I invite?
Thank you very much. My name is Reza Siregar. I am with the Indonesia Financial Group, and I'm also advisor to the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs. I have one question for you, Prof. Grossman. Study have shown, right? I mean, there's a close link between trade, investment, and cross-border flows on the financial market, on the banking side. So if anything, any disruption happening in any one of them, it has much wider impact, not just only in investment, but also on the rest of our balance of payment. The COVID-19 has shown also how difficult it is for us to coordinate in terms of just sharing the basic principle of vaccines, medication, and so on and so forth. My question is this: how serious do you think the issue or the jargon that we have seen from the US policy on friendshoring, for instance? We have seen also how the usage of some of the financial transactions facility that we have taken for granted, like SWIFT, for instance, are now being used as well as policy engagement. Okay, do you think this is a continuing trend, or do you think this is something that just rhetoric that will go away in the short run? Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you for the question. You know, I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I think the economic forces for reversing the recent policies are quite powerful. I think the financial benefits to immediately firms and eventually consumers are quite substantial. I think that the political strength of the corporate sector will push back against the trends we've had. So in that sense, I'm hopeful that it's temporary, but I'm not very confident, I'm afraid, in that view. As I say, the politics are unlike any I've seen since I started my career. I was very hopeful, as I mentioned, that this was a Trump-specific and Republican-specific set of events on the U.S. side. I think that no longer believe that to be the case. The more the U.S. does that's go it alone, the more Europe retaliates. The more Europe retaliates, it spills over to the entire world. So I think the economic forces are still very powerful and lead me to optimism. The political forces very much less so. So I wish I could predict the future. As Neil Bohr once said, prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Professor Grossman. Now I would like to invite the next question from my colleague over there.
Thank you very much for the occasions. My name is Ismail. I come from Triple IU Depok. So the questions would be directed to Prof. Lukito. Previously, you mentioned that it is very important to highlight the digital identity and how to provide quality educations, especially for vocational foundations. But as highlighted by Professor Greg, that policies recommended by him is that how we can increase the level of service liberalizations or intermediate services. So what I'd like to ask you is about, do you have something like mechanism in your minds related to how to augment or how to integrate service liberalizations in digital identity to provide more inclusive educations in the Asian region level? Thank you.
Well, actually, it's not easy to make the integration for the ASEAN, but I just raised the main issue is that we are facing that problem, and we have to, in terms for the education, because the existing right now is no more. I mean, we cannot make it our human resources to face the advanced technology as mentioned by Ibu Lili and also Prof. Heckman. So the point is, we have to concentrate also in the education. Otherwise, we cannot survive. And it will be good if all of the ASEAN member states of ASEAN can sit together and set the most important thing that all of the member states of ASEAN have to improve the curriculum for the education for it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I invite our colleague over there, on the third row, please.
Thank you. My name is Rio. I'm from Universitas Gajah Mada. My question is for Professor Kito. I want just ask a simple question regarding about digital diplomacy and how does it affect on the development of ASEAN digital community that you have mentioned in your speech. Thank you.
Say it again. What is the question? How the ASEAN?
How digital diplomacy affect the development of the ASEAN digital community?
Oh, well, do I have the answer? And then, because I'm not in charge actually, but from my perspective, because you're asking the diplomacy. Pak Kasan, probably you can answer, because I'm afraid that my thought is different with policy of the government. Yeah. The easiest way is the ASEAN countries has to sit together and discuss it deeply about that. And as soon as possible, and then during this Indonesian chairmanship, much more, it's better to do it. And take a note, deliver to Pak Kasan, to go back to the government and then sit here. And also for the Pak Siregar, probably we can take a note that, because Pak Siregar and Pak Kasan, they have to take care about it and they have to answer. Thank you.
I can see that you have many burning questions for our speakers, but I can also see that there's a long list of online questions which are waiting. So just let me pick up one final, and if we have time, we can come back. So lady, please, would you like to raise a question or? Okay, please, Dr. Julia.
I will let the lady first. Okay. Not first, I mean.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ha, and good morning. Thank you so much, Professor Grossman and Pak Enggar as well for very insightful presentation. One quick question to Professor Grossman and one to Pak Enggar. Professor Grossman, one of the standout theme from your presentation is this emergence of the growing importance of intermediate services, especially the digitally enabled services, as well as you highlighted a lot about global supply chain restructuring, decoupling, and so on. Do you think we are going to see sort of like a bifurcation where you have a shortening or a more regionalized version of the supply chain on the one that's actually more goods-based that perhaps a regional community like ASEAN can concentrate on, and at the same time you actually have a more globalized services supply chains, if you like? Would that be like an observation that we expect to see going forward? And for Pak Enggar, I note that you mentioned, I think there is no ASEAN countries varies. I think each of the ASEAN member states has its own aspiration as well. But I took your point that in competing in the global economy, we should not do that at the expense of the collective, advantages of ASEAN. Moving forward, as ASEAN develop its post-2025 vision and is now looking at the ASEAN Community 2045, how do you think ASEAN can work together more effectively? I think you highlight that we are prolific in coming up with roadmaps, agreements, strategies, and so on. But implementation takes place at the national level, and you have that experience of, looking at that from the Indonesian perspective. How can we actually make sure that ASEAN can enforce implementation of its commitments better, so that that you can actually see actual results of the ASEAN community building? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there are two questions. May I invite Professor Grossman first?
Yes, I think your observation is not only about the future, but in fact about the present and past. Supply chains in goods are remarkably regional in nature. One of the strongest empirical facts in the trade literature is so-called gravity, that distance matters a lot when it comes to goods trade. So to take just one example, the automobile supply chain in North America, an astounding share of the value added of a car sold, American car sold throughout the world, comes from Canada, United States, or Mexico. Cars sold in Asia or produced in Asia, the value added comes from Japan, Korea, and to an increasing extent, China. So I think that's an inevitable feature of goods trade, where distance matters greatly. With the urgency of time and inventory minimization, you want to be able to adopt quickly, which means buying from your nearby partners. On the other hand, as I suggested, for service trade, distance matters much less, and we see that already with the Indian call centers, which predominate. It's very hard to call a customer service in the United States and not get an Indian on the other end of the line, and I think that's a natural feature the fact that services are much more portable over distance with lesser costs. Of course, language is a barrier for service trade, but as I suggested, that will be lessening over time. So I very much agree with the spirit of your question that I think goods supply chains at least have run their course in terms of deepening, and probably will have some retrenchment also for the political reasons I mentioned. I think the opportunity for more global trade and services is technologically there if we have the will to encourage it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned already, we have the agreement, we have the procedures, we have all of the, so many, and ASEAN plus one, for instance, ASEAN plus so many. But then the question is how to implement. Well, we have the facility ASEAN Secretariat right now, and if it will be very helpful if starting the ASEAN Secretariat to invite all of the not only waiting for the schedule for AEM, but then with the initiative of the ASEAN Secretariat or Indonesia right, well, it's until September. It's only August, September. Then followed by the Laos, if I'm not mistaken, Laos. More intensive meeting, have and wants, what do you have and what I want. Within the ASEAN, it's more details and more. I mean, we can, any countries. If I'm not mistaken, the whole member of ASEAN is already ratifying the agreement, including RCEP. If I'm not mistaken, it's already ratified. But Indonesia is 6 months ago. It's already approved. We can use it. We can use it and use that the agreement to deal with other countries outside the member of the member of RCEP. That will be really helpful for ASEAN countries and also for the rest of the world. Yeah, openly, we need open discussion actually. Pak Akasan, you have to lead and may. Because, wow, as Indonesian, proud to say, all of members of ASEAN will see what's Indonesian initiative and what's Indonesian do. As big brother, thank you.
Thank you very much. So time runs fast when you have something enjoyable to spend on. So we only have 2 minutes left, and I would like to give the stage for our online participants. We have one question here on the priorities of ASEAN countries collectively. Which are the priorities needed to promote potential trade growth in digital service? May I invite Professor Grossman first?
Yes, well, I'm hardly an expert on ASEAN. In fact, I'm very embarrassed to admit that when I was invited to talk on this panel, I had to look up what were the members of ASEAN. So I'll speak more broadly. I think to facilitate trade and services, as I suggested on my last slide, I think harmonization of regulatory rules as concern privacy and data protocols will be essential. It's been a bit the Wild West in terms of how countries have treated the regulation of services, also in financial services, but also in digitally delivered services. So I think that should be a priority for international, things that countries can do on themselves as my colleague suggested, investment in the appropriate set of skills is a high priority. But as a collectivity, as a group, I think it's working through the issues of regulatory disharmonization that we have at the moment and moving towards a more harmonized set of rules and regulations for service provision.
Would you like to?
Yeah. Investment. That's the key also for the digital services. That's one of the priority, and also as mentioned by the Deputy Secretary General regarding the DFAP. Also is well, all of us have to see all of us, it means that the ASEAN countries has to see the DFAP, and then if it will be it will be helpful, then finalize as soon as possible. But the most important is investment facing this growth in digital services. You mentioned in the last paragraph.
Yes, let me second that. I agree with that completely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we still, unless my watch is running out of battery, we still have some minutes, even though this timer here is off. So the second question to Professor Grossman, technology can be considered accelerator for the servicification. However, this depends on the digital technologies level of firm and industry. So the question is, what are the critical factors that need to be improved so that digital SMEs can be service providers, particularly in the manufacturing sectors?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I'll take a stab. Certainly, the quality of digital connectivity and the reliability of the internet services are critical. They've come in my country to be well accepted unless you get into a small town in a rural area, but otherwise digital connectivity is something that we take for granted. I've been in India recently, and that's very much not the case. So further investment will be critical, especially for the small and medium-sized enterprises that can't provide it for themselves. And then at a larger level, the skills that we've already talked about, digital literacy and training will be critical for countries to be able to take advantage of the opportunities.
Thank you very much. So may I check with our organizer if I can collect any more questions or no? Okay, so maybe the last burning question. Yes. Yep. Brian, please.
Thank you. I enjoyed both your presentations very much. My name is Brian. I'm advisor to Alibaba Global Initiatives. Professor Grossman, I wanted to ask you a question from your perspective. When it comes to new technology like artificial intelligence and regulation, how does one balance the dynamic between trying to ensure that it's safely used and effectively used for innovation and economic growth versus safety of the public? And what are you seeing in terms of, say, US cases versus, say, other regions in the world, Europe, Asia, etc.?
The short and sarcastic answer is very carefully. I mean, events have moved so quickly. I think we weren't prepared. Dr. Lilly and I edited the book that she mentioned on AI and robots It hasn't come out yet, and it's already obsolete, I think, with the events that have been taking place in AI. At the moment, I think our ill preparedness points to focusing on the risks rather than running ahead. If I had to predict, will that happen? I'm not so confident. I mean, the government is not so good at regulating sorts of things, and the incentive for firms to push ahead and win the race, so to speak, are enormous. So I think we have good reason to be concerned, but the risks are real. And I think, as your question suggests, we do have to balance the economic benefits that are waiting for us to realize against the risks to privacy, to security, and the like. How we should do it, that's above my pay grade.
So thank you very much, Professor Grossman. Now the time is really up. So I'm sorry to say that we have to wrap up this session. But before we wrap up, please join me to have a big applause to our two distinguished speakers. Thank you again for sharing your expertise on this very pressing issue of how to strengthen economic integration amidst the global challenges. I would also like to thank our audience for your time to spend with us and for your active participation in the discussion session. We very much look forward to seeing you again. Just this afternoon, we have 3 parallel sessions focusing on specific issues that has been laid out in this preliminary session. So I do hope to see you again and also see you again in our future events. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, speakers, for the thought-provoking discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Jean Grossman, Professor of International Economics from Princeton University, and Mr. Enggar Tias Tolukita, Executive Chairman B Universe, and also former Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Thank you very much. And also thank you, Ms. Donti Tanha, for leading this insightful discussion. Please, everyone, one more time, give big round of applause for all the speakers and moderator. Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. All right, maybe before we close, let's have a picture together before we end this session. All right, the moderator in the middle. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, after this we will have a break, lunch break. But before we proceed to the next session, let me just inform you again the agenda, which will be divided into 3 sessions. So there will be 3 breakout sessions. The parallel session 1 will discuss the topic of recovery and rebuilding with the topic education and training system for future skills. And act as moderator, there will be research economist from ABDI, Dr. Daniel Surya Dharma, and the speakers, Dr. Jean Baldwin Grossman from Princeton University, Dr. Maria Monica Wiharja, visiting fellow ICS Yusof Ishak Institute, Dr. Gok Sunju, Chief Skills Officer from Skills Future Singapore, and the parallel session 2. We'll discuss the topic about digital transformation, highlight on services, finance and payment. And there will be the moderator for this session, senior economist from ERIA, Dr. Fauzia Zen, and the speakers, Dr. Reza Yamora Siregar, Head Senior Executive Vice President from Indonesia Financial Group Progress, Brian A. Wong, Advisor from Alibaba Global Initiative, Fitria Irmi Triswati, Group Head of Retail Payment System, Director from Bank Indonesia, And the parallel session 3, which is the last session, will discuss regarding energy transition, highlighting on sustainable development. Act as moderator, there will be senior energy economist from ERIA, Dr. Han Pumin. And the speakers, there will be 3 speakers for these parallel sessions. Associate Professor Dr. Nora Sikin Ahmad Ludin from University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Dr. Lee Tai Ha, Managing Director at FinFuture Prize, FinFuture Foundation. And Dr. Aloysius Joko Perwanto, Energy Economist from ERIA. So ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you again, for seminar materials will be available digital. You may scan the QR code provided on your ID card and on the screen. So this QR code will grant you access to the presentation slides, Q&A link, and also evaluation form that can be filled at the end of the event to get an e-certificate. Now we invite you to take a short break to enjoy the lunch that we have provided in the foyer area. For Friday prayer is prepared in Rajawali Place. So if you want to take the Friday prayer, please you can go to the Rajawali Place and you can follow the usher, or maybe you can ask to our committee about the location for the prayer, for the Friday prayer. We will start again the next session at 2 p.m. Once again, we will start the parallel session at 2 p.m. So please be on time and ready. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rani Raj as your host for today. For this morning, signing off, I would like to extend my gratitude to all of you who have joined us here, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for your presence and kind attention. Thank you very much. I hope to see you again in the next occasion. Stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to stay happy. Salam sejahtera, shalom, om santi, santi, santi om, namo buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.